the Retirement Cafe podcast, Finding the Light in Dementia, with Dr Jane Mullins. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast with me, your host, Justin King. If you're thinking about your retirement or already retired, you're in the right place. My aim is to help you plan for and live a successful and meaningful retirement. Retirement is far more than just a financial event. It's a significant life event, a major transition, which will bring with it new challenges and opportunities. So each episode contains tips, information, and inspiration to help you feel more informed and confident about your retirement. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast. I'm so glad you can join me. Before getting into this week's episode, I wanted to say a special thank you to John McGregor, who kindly took the time to write a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts following our conversation a few months ago. He said, "Great content, love this podcast, a one-on-one candid conversation loaded with useful content. Great stuff." Thanks, John. You can check out my conversation with John McGregor in episode 125. And if you enjoy this or any other episode, please do leave a review on Apple Podcasts to help more people like you find us. It really, really does help. So let's crack on. I'm sure that we all know or have known someone who is living with dementia. One of the hardest things for those of us in this position is knowing the best way to support the person suffering. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr Jane Mullins, who has devoted over 25 years to the study and practice of dementia care. She has uncovered certain common features that can help caregivers and the people they care for find better ways of coping. Her practical experience is backed up by expert knowledge gained from keeping up with the research, lecturing and studying for her PhD, in which she shares in her book, Finding the Light in Dementia. In our conversation, Jane shares why she got into dementia care and how she is working to create sustainable activities to help families continue to communicate and connect with their loved ones who are living with dementia, and the motivations behind her book, Finding the Light in Dementia. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Jane Mullins. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Jane Mullins.
Hello, thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, Jane. My pleasure. Jane, for those who don't know you, you've got obviously, you're a doctor, and I know you're an author, and you've done lots of stuff in your career to date. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, actually, I'm actually a nurse, but I have a PhD. So just to sort of clear that up, because I think, of course,
yes,
a medical doctor. No, I started my nursing journey. Well, I suppose before I trained as a nurse, I worked as a care assistant in a nursing home in the early 1980s. So worked very closely with the residents who had all sorts of conditions, many who had dementia. Then went on to train, good old-fashioned training as a nurse, apprenticeship, and worked very closely with people who have stroke at the time. So I've always been quite drawn to working with people who can't communicate so well for themselves. I've always had this deep sense of trying to help support them, trying to get them to express their needs. So qualified as a nurse, worked in various places, intensive care and coronary care for a while. But actually, I've always been really drawn to working with people who have neurodegenerative conditions and older people. Went on to work in the memory clinics first of all in Bath, and I learned an awful lot then about the brain and all the various sort of rarer types of dementia, as well as Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia. So I learned a lot about what we call the neuropsychology of the brain, but also I helped support people through their diagnosis. So I was very much, despite knowing quite a lot of the science, I'm very much a nurse and supported a lot of people through their diagnosis and their families. I was very involved in the clinical trials of all the drugs that are now licensed. So I was sort of research nursing then. Wow. So I would see, we call them patients coming to the memory clinic. They would be involved in the study, and every 6 months or so, I'd see them. I'd have to go through some what we call cognitive tests with people, which is always quite a tough one. So I learned a lot of skills around trying to help support them when they're often very aware of how they're deteriorating. And I learned a lot really from listening to them and listening to their families. Then went to work in the memory clinic in Cardiff, similar work really, with a lot more emotional support for families and for the person having the diagnosis. And then and in between that, I did manage a nursing home. Sorry, I've been around a long time. I did manage a nursing home where I did originally work as a care assistant. So, and that had 95% of our residents had some form of dementia.
Gosh.
But when I look back, and I didn't know much then, we treated everybody as a human being, as everybody should be, knew all about their life histories long before we now know that's what we should do. So it was a very busy, happy home, really, with people fulfilling their lives, later on at a later stage. So, and then I've completed 2 years ago my PhD, which is all about how to communicate with people who have dementia through sensory ways.
Right.
And that's using tourism memories and multi-sensory so I created films, soundscapes. We shared food and drink together. So it was about sort of going back, bringing couples back together through the senses and through using holidays as a sort of vehicle, really, but anything could be used, but sharing experiences, creating films for them. And what I found was when I visited the families initially, the couples, the dementia was massive. It's a huge part of their what was going on in their lives. And actually through fulfilling this suitcase of memories, it seemed to rekindle their couplehood. It seemed to bring back. The challenge I have now is how do you sustain that? How do you keep that going? But certainly around issues around COVID now, these sort of activities could help people who are isolated at home to try and keep. It's a really hard one, isn't it? But to try and engage them in something interesting they can do together that isn't just all about the dementia being a huge thing and the one person being a caregiver.
Yeah. So give me a bit more kind of detail about the kind of the travel and the suitcase and that type of thing. So have you got some stories of actually kind of examples that could bring that to life?
Yeah, certainly. One of the couples, I did my, they produced this with me. They chose what they wanted. But when I first arrived, it was a very broad remit. I want to explore dementia and tourism. What do you think we should do? So we sort of built this up between us. I just frantically wrote a mind map, as I said to them, tell me about your holidays. The lady had dementia. She was struggling with quite a lot of her language skills. As we were doing this,
was she already in a home, or was she?
She was at home with her husband.
This was a home and husband, and was her husband suffering as well, or
no? Well, he was just very, very exhausted because he was caring for her, but she was very aware of her condition, but really struggled with her communication and being able to actually express herself. So we started looking back over some of their photos. I visited them 6 times. And when I went back the second time, there was a suitcase on the chair with loads of souvenirs, passports, maps, everything to do with holidays. that they'd got together themselves, really. It wasn't my idea, which was wonderful, because when we do research, we really don't want to be the researcher up here telling people what to do, but we want it to evolve. We want it to sort of come out from, what they wanted. So we had their suitcase of maps and all sorts of things that, objects, which really helped them to talk about things together. But it also helped her memories by touching things and really, helping her with the language. I noticed as time got on, she wasn't struggling so much. She was really relaxed, because a lot of people think, I'm going to be involved in research now, this is going to be really stressful. We all had a thoroughly lovely time, to be honest. And then the 1 week then they gave me all their photos. I got a lovely guy called Tom Tremaine to help me. He turned them into a film and put soundscapes with them. So there were photos. They chose their particular holidays when they went to Australia, so it was a big theme. So they were talking about the sound of the sea. So Tom then helped me create soundscapes so that we could, as the film was created with their photos and them talking throughout it, we had the sound of the sea. So it's that, and the one really interesting thing there was a photo of a kookaburra bird that they'd given me, and when a lot of people who have dementia may struggle with how they see, so as a visual perceptual problem, as well as if they are older, they might also have age-related visual problems as well. So the idea of just using photos isn't always helpful, because people might not be able to make out what's in the picture. And as we put up the photo of the kookaburra on the screen, it was meaningless. And then when we put the soundscape with the photo, the memories of that, she said, that blimmin' bird, it woke us up every morning. It didn't matter, she couldn't remember the name of the bird, but that memory and that emotion, and this is what all my work is about, is that emotion was very much still there.
And Jane, is there a lasting impact on this? So I appreciate that when someone's looking at an old photo and then they're made to communicate better and they're feeling more relaxed. But is that just for the moment, or is there some extended benefits from this?
I think it depends. I think, as we all know, everybody is different and at different stages of the condition. Every time I went to visit them, she always remembered, she associated me with happy memories. She didn't associate me as the researcher coming. No. So she was at that point where she remembered that she'd had a really nice time. Yes. I think this is the challenge, though, to sustain this further on. What I'm trying to do is to sort of spread the idea of what we can do to families, that when obviously lockdown has gone, that families can come in and do this sort of work, but have these enjoyable experiences together, because often friends disappear when people have dementia, and I think a lot of the time it's because people don't know what to say or they don't know what to do. Whereas if if your neighbour or your old friend could come in and, let's get the suitcase out, we shared this. They talked a lot about this hot chocolate. They used to go to this special cafe in Sydney. They talked about that endlessly. So I one day I went armed with a bag full of shopping. I found the recipe. I probably can't say on the podcast what make it was, but they made the hot chocolate together, and she hadn't been in the kitchen for a long time because she didn't feel she was trusted, and it was just beautiful because the smell, he was stirring the chocolate in, she was breaking it all up, and as she could feel it, she could take, it was just a beautiful experience, really. And they had some spices to go in it, and then we sat around the table and shared food that they talked about a lot. So this old buffet restaurant they used to go to. Food is a huge thing when people talk about holidays and reminiscing. It's interesting that. And we did have a little snifter as well, because there was, I can't remember what the drink was now, but it was a little liqueur that they talked about a lot. So, and that whole just lovely experience of using all the senses. I mean, I know that some people who have dementia may lose certain senses, but I think you've got to try things out because you don't know really.
No.
And I suppose in answer to your question, sorry, I do go on a bit. I think this is where I want to create it into something sustainable for families to be able to continue to do. And it's got to be done in a way that's easy, because I know a lot of families or a lot of carers are very busy and they're very tired. But if they can see the joy and they can reconnect together, it's hugely valuable. Really is.
Yeah. So I'm kind of feeling that this is a really great kind of strategy that everyone can reach out for, isn't it? I mean, if you know someone suffering from dementia and you don't know, you're worried about how you're going to communicate or what you're going to talk about or how you can help out, etc., to go and revisit and find out what they love to do, and if there's photographic memories there. That'd be a wonderful thing. We know that. I mean, I think you probably confirm this, but I think music is often another one, isn't it? That is successful with dementia. But again, I'm seeing this link with emotion. This seems to be the connectivity here. That music or travel or food, these are all emotional experiences, aren't they? Which, wow.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's what we're looking at is that, and the big thing I try to get across in my training is that somebody may not remember an experience. They may not remember that you're their son, daughter, or, but they may know that you mean something to them. But, when you think about what is a son, what is a daughter, that side of things, you're using all that sort of cognitive side of the brain. But if we can actually connect through the emotions, it's a very different. It's the limbic part of the brain. And people seem to retain so much more of that. So in terms, but there's also a downside. One thing I'm really conscious of. Not everybody likes reminiscence, and I understand why. Some people also feel, why do I want to reminisce? I've still got my life to live, and I'm very much. So I'm sort of moving away from the reminiscence, more towards looking at the senses. So what sort of things do we want to connect with? But also, if somebody's had a traumatic past, we've got to be really aware that we could be actually stimulating some traumatic memories as well. So it's very important when we're with somebody, if we know, I mean, sometimes we don't know what people's pasts are, but it's very important to be in that moment and acknowledge if somebody's struggling quite a bit emotionally. But generally, when we're looking at holiday memories, it's usually a good, they're usually associated with lovely emotions, aren't they? So, so I'm hoping that can help, really.
And I suppose even if I can imagine from the couple that you were talking about, even if the kind of day-to-day struggle with one partner with dementia and the other one not, in essence, acting as a carer, even just moments in the day where there is connection again, where there is that reminiscence, where there is that kind of communication going on, that's you're actually giving some respite, aren't you, for both parties to the couple?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it wasn't just for it brought them back, their couplehood, as we call it. It sort of really did. I mean, it was quite funny because at one point they were arguing a bit, which they hadn't done for years by the sounds. So I got a bit of an idea of what their relationship had been like. Not that they argued a lot, but, she was actually sort of, they were arguing over a memory of something, a little bit. And and we had a bit of a laugh about that, because even that had gone. that, how their relationship was, and what can happen is powers can change within relationships a lot. So it was good to see she was really coming back to life, in standing up for herself a bit.
Yeah.
Not that he was overbearing at all, but it was, it just I think as well, it's the big other takeaway I always want people to realize is that we should not always be coming from this lens of loss all the time. We should be working with what people are able to do. And actually, I know a lot of people who have dementia who are really trying to fight this sort of myth, in that, I know people who've had dementia for about 10 years, not everybody, everyone's different, who are still living a really full life and are very much proactive in trying to get this across to people. Don't focus on what somebody can't do. Focus on what they can, and focus on the emotions. That's when I hear people say, they're not the same person as they were. That's how it feels to them on the outside, but we don't know how that person who has dementia may be feeling. They are still there. I believe that at every stage they are still there. We've just got to find a way to connect, really. So I heard a daughter once say about her mum that she felt that the tide was going out. And so she had to follow her into the sea. And I thought that was such a great metaphor for what we need to do. Yeah. And actually, we can have such a lovely time. I realise when one of the reasons I love to work with people who have dementia is that it's a creative role. There are no rules. Okay, there are approaches, of which I have mentioned in my book.
Absolutely, I'm coming to that.
But it's more, it's about finding ways that we can connect, and through, memories, senses, emotions, and sorry, I'll go on.
No. Your book, Finding the Light in Dementia. Tell me about where was the inspiration for that, and if you can give us a little kind of insight into your key message.
Okay. Basically, I was just finishing my PhD, and I started writing a blog and an article for the Mature Times. And so, it was all sorts of things fresh in my mind from when I was working with these couples. And so I'd written about 10 different blogs by now. And the first one, everyone always thinks dementia, memory, not always the case. There are different types of dementias. And I would always say the first thing to me is communication. So, I wrote a blog about diagnosis, because I was hearing so much from people that hadn't been to the memory clinics where I had worked, where we were actually supporting people. I was hearing awful stories where people were just given a diagnosis and then left and had no idea where to go, or any emotional support at all. So I wrote a blog on that then, and I just sort of carried on writing these blogs until I had quite a lot of material, really. And it was just sort of friends and colleagues that were just saying, why don't you just put all this together, really? Which I did, which took quite a bit longer. It's not as simple as just, but I really want to make sure as well, because I am a researcher as well as a nurse, that everything in the book is based on the stories that I have heard and supported people from their diagnosis through to the end of life, because I've cared for people in care homes to give them a comfortable end of life as well. So the whole sort of journey and all the different types of dementias. But I've made sure that everything in there has also been backed up by research. So everything in my book, it's not a research written book. It's very much for families. It's very much for sort of some support and advice. But I've made sure that whatever I've written in there, I've checked that there is research to back that up as well. So that it is based on evidence as well as my own experience as a nurse, listener, observer.
So who's it for? Who's the ideal audience, do you think, who should be buying? The ideal
audience really are for families or friends, but also a lot of health and social care staff have said it's really benefited them because there's lots of information in there that they can transfer the knowledge. So I've written it more about, the first chapter is about a diagnosis, what now? But it also is written for the person who has dementia. And actually, I have been asked by a few people if I could sort of rewrite it so that it would be helpful for people themselves. So I'm just chatting to a few people who have got dementia to see if they'll help me do that. But basically, the aim of the book is to explain what a person who has dementia may be experiencing, how they may be experiencing their world around them, because environment is huge in terms of how a person may feel. And actually, when you can understand what they may be experiencing, you can actually think of your own solutions to how you can care as well. But I also offer lots of practical advice and support. So little things like, for instance, when you have dementia, and I feel I shouldn't be saying this, I should have someone who has dementia who is saying this really, but it takes a lot longer to process things. So if you're talking to someone and the radio is on or the TV is on, and then, I don't know, well, we've got the rag and bone man who comes round at the moment making lots of noise here. If there's too much sensory overload, I know I talk about using the senses, but we have to also be aware that we don't overload someone. So one of my biggest bugbears is if I go somewhere and there's a radio on, because that's the person has got to try and process what that, and you're competing with that radio maybe when you're trying to talk to them. So, I offer sort of support around that, explain why. So they're having trouble or taking longer to process things. And so be aware, stand still for a minute and how peaceful is it? Are there lots of things going on sensory that might be distracting as well? So it's things like that, really. So I cover very much about communication, about memory. But as I say, not all. I mean, I know somebody who has Lewy body dementia very well, and he's had this for about 7 years now, doesn't have a problem with his memory. In fact, his first symptom was that he lost his sense of smell.
Wow.
So I'm learning from him, I'm learning from everybody. So, but the book was written generically that it would cover anyone of any type of dementia in a way, and at most stages, really.
Right. Great. I'm sure it'll be a welcome bit of knowledge from all your years of experience. Tell me, a bit of advice now, and I don't know whether you've got the answer, but a friend of mine posted on Facebook yesterday, and she said, it's heartbreaking. My mum's in a home. She's suffering from dementia. I'm not the one person who's allowed to visit because that's another family member. But of course I want to call her and I want to FaceTime her, and she won't even answer my calls. What can she do?
That is a difficult one. It's also very difficult when I don't know them as well. I would think quite a few things. I would think firstly is, can she speak to, and she probably has, to the care manager or any of the particular carers who know her mum well, and ask, do they have any suggestions? I don't know at what stage her mum is able to understand. So maybe, I don't know if she can understand that actually seeing somebody on a screen, it's not the solution. People need to be seen in person, don't they?
Yeah.
I would normally say, if you're struggling to connect with someone, is to use a prop or find something that you have in common or know that person. Of course, can't do that at this stage. So she has somebody going in to visit.
Yes, she does.
But she's obviously needing that connection with her mum.
Yeah, yeah.
It's whether her mum can actually understand consciously who she is, what's going on. It's really difficult unless I knew them.
Yeah, sure. Slightly unfair question, but I just thought it'd be interesting.
No, but I'm very conscious that of a lot of the things that I would normally recommend, we can't do because of COVID.
No.
It's all around social interaction, but I am sort of with people I suppose I know more easily. I can try and work things out. But that's what I mean. It is a creative process. It is not a right or wrong, I mean, if she wanted to get in touch with me, we could have a chat.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Very kind of you. So tell me about your kind of research and the training program that you're developing. Tell me what you're doing there. Yes,
well, it started off 11 years ago when I first started doing my PhD. It took that long to do it. No, it didn't. It took 7 years. But I was talking with a friend of mine who was also doing her PhD, who specialised in visual impairment. And we were actually procrastinating because we should have been studying, and over coffee. And we started, talking about our passions were about training in communication with people who work with people who have visual impairment or people who have dementia. So we started sort of having this conversation. And then we were talking about the values of what sort of training, what we needed to look at. And we came up with this whole idea of dignity, understanding, empathy. And so it sort of came up with this duet care idea. So the whole aim as well, and this is something I feel very strongly about, is that the people who are giving care need to be able to care for themselves a lot as well, especially now, because we're hearing some really, heartbreaking stories, aren't we, in terms of carers are just so stressed and challenged by what's going on. And because I've been there as a care assistant, I've been there as a nurse, and I'm totally aware of the stresses sometimes. It's so important that we can offer resources to help them so that they can care for the people who have dementia well. So this sort of idea came up about 11 years ago. Various things in life got in the way. So like families and jobs, various things. But I kept building and building on this training program. And then I think I was driving my husband nuts because it's been like a labor of love, because I'd be then working, so work full time. And then I was saying, well, duet, I've got to do duet, blah, blah, blah. And then I'd be like, it just trying to do, develop a training company and things, it was quite difficult in terms of needing the time, the resources, the money to develop it, and face-to-face training. So I think about in 10 years, it reared its head about 5 times and then went back down. And I eventually said, no more, got this job now. I'm not going to, duets. It's on the memory stick, And I'd been lecturing in health and social care. So I'd been developing personal and professional development materials for our students who were all working in care. So that sort of was a bit of sort of got me started a bit as well. And then when COVID started last year, and I thought, I've got all these resources here, and people were starting to be using more, technology. It sort of made me think, could I turn this into on an online platform? So that's the start, really. And whenever I've been lecturing or doing any sort of training, again, it links to my sensory work, but it's about creating films, creating soundscapes, making that training engaging, enjoyable, deep learning, because a lot of the training that you see is really, I've seen some of the files that these poor carers have to go through and write, and I mean, I have family members who have dyslexia, so I'm sort of very much aware around all different learning styles, and with our students it was so it's about trying to make this engaging. We have far more resources at our fingertips now than ever. So like what you're doing now, I'll be creating podcasts. So what I'm trying to do now is to create an affordable training platform for all care providers, because I know there's a huge issue around recruitment and retention of staff, and paying to train your staff and then for the staff to go is one of the biggest problems that care providers have. So if I can make this affordable, that they can have this platform with this accredited training, and then also within that it's going to have a wellbeing hub, so all sorts of resources to help the care staff, as well as a monthly Q&A Zoom. Then for one fee a year, and it is a bargain, they can decide, they can train their staff where and when they want to. So it helps me to feel that I'm getting that out there. I'm hoping that it's, I'm listening to a lot of care providers about the issues that they're having. And so I thought, right, let's go for it.
I can imagine it's just a massive growing need to, and of course, the better trained the people are, the more accomplished they become, and then also the better care that their residents and patients get, isn't it? So
and I mean, there will be like a sort of, it's now called Finding the Light in Dementia Training, because that links with the book and it makes sense. It tells people what it is, so I'm now crowdfunding to raise the funds to get all the filmmakers, the podcaster, all the people in to help me. I've got a great team of people. They're all lined up. I just need the funds. So
good.
Very excited about it.
So, Jane, where can people find out your book and the work that you do of the Centre for Innovative Aging, and maybe even the crowdfunding platform if someone wants to get involved with you and get in contact? Tell me where they find out all the information about you.
Well, I should also say I'm working for the Arwin Institute in Swansea University, which is where we're actually doing a lot of developing research around design and the creative industries in sort of research and design for our ageing population. And of course, because my interest and passion is around dementia, that's sort of more where I'm working. So we're looking at trying to help create more, encourage people to be more physically active at home. So there's all sorts of research involved in there. My book is called Finding the Light in Dementia. It's self-published, so the best place to get it is Amazon. But you actually, you've only got to. I've got a website, www.findingthelightindementia.com.
Well, we will put all the links on the show notes on our website to all of those great web links that you've done, you've told about today. Really been really stimulating and lovely chatting with you this afternoon. Great work that you're doing, and it's something that we touch on quite a few times in the podcast around dementia, and it's a massive concern for all of our listeners and my clients who I work with, that as they age, it's frightening, and anything I think which can be done to help anybody going through it, whether you're the one suffering or you're the one caring, any help or knowledge you can get, and I think it's fantastic what you're doing, and all power to you, and let's hope that everything works out as a success.
Oh, well, thank you. Can I just say one last thing, that the platform will also provide resources for families and for people who have dementia as well. So it won't be just for care providers and carers, it'll be for families too.
Great, great.
Watch this space. But there is a lot on my book website too as well.
Okay, fantastic. Well, as I say, we'll put all those links in the notes, and hopefully everyone will take a look. Thank you for your time, Jane.
Okay, thanks, Justin. That's great. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you once again to Jane for joining me to share her vast knowledge and experience of one of our most feared and least understood conditions, dementia. To find out more about Jane and her book and the great work that she does, you can check out the show notes on our website at theretirementcafe.co.uk, where you will find all the useful links. You can also find links on the show notes to other episodes on the topic of dementia. And if you prefer, as so many of you are now doing, to watch my conversations, you'll find a link to the video version on YouTube in the show notes too. To get in touch, share your thoughts or ideas for topics that you'd love to hear more about, you can find me on Twitter at JustinKingCFP, or you can email me on hello@retirementcafe.co.uk. So until next time, this is Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.